Good afternoon, folks. Good afternoon, folks. We're going to get started here in about 3 minutes, so if everyone could grab their seats, we'd really appreciate it. Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming to today's DMVMoves Task Force meeting. My name is Nick Donahue. I'm the facilitator of this meeting. I'm joined here by Chair Smedberg and Chairs Allen. We have a really good agenda, I think, for today's discussion. Before we get into that, I'm going to give them the opportunity to say a few words, and then we'll jump into the agenda. But I really, again, just want to thank all of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to come join us here today to talk about this important topic.
Thanks so much, Nick. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Charles Allen. So I, as you likely know, a member of the Council of the District of Columbia. I'm also the Vice Chair of the Board for the Council of Governments and proud to be continuing to serve as the co-chair of our DMVMoves Task Force, overseeing our joint initiative of COG and Metro to create that unified vision and sustainable funding model for the region's transit network. Thanks everybody again for taking time out of your schedules for being here today. And let me officially call this meeting of the task force to order. A lot has changed in our country and even in our region over the last few months since we last met. A lot has also happened within the transportation area as well as priorities. But I think we can all agree that now more than ever is our opportunity to really come together as a region and think about what our collective success looks like, as well as define what our own future is going to be. A reliable, safe, and more seamless transit network is going to play a big role in that, and that makes the work of this DMVMoves Task Force all the more important. Again, I want to thank all of you, your staffs, all the partners and members that are helping make this happen. Let me turn now to Paul Smedberg, who I'm proud to have as my co-chair, to introduce himself.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Paul Smedberg. I'm WMATA Board Vice Chair and co-chair of the DMVMoves Task Force. I want to start by saying thank you to COG for hosting us here at their headquarters. I appreciate Clark and all the staff work that goes into this. Metro has had 47 months of consistent ridership growth, leading transit ridership across the nation for 2 years. This past Tuesday, Metro Rail had its second busiest, highest ridership day since 2020. And with this growth, our customer satisfaction is 92% on rail, 83% on bus, both historic highs for Metro. I'd also like to note that there will not be in-person public comment at this meeting, but we have been accepting written comments before our meeting on the website and have the option for members of the public to record their comments at today's meeting. Both will be shared with the task force. As Chair Allen said, a lot has changed in this region and the nation over the past few months, and now more than ever, it's important that we come together to share our collective and achieve our collective goals. I'll turn it back to Chair Allen, and actually, Randy, we'll come back to you in just a moment or two. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Smedberg. During today's meeting, we actually have a lot of information to go over. We also have a lot of time set aside for discussion. If you remember, at our last meeting, we charged our advisory groups with the task of thinking big and digging deep. And so since our last meeting, our Government Partners Advisory Group, which has been chaired by Fairfax County Executive Brian Hill, and our Community Partners Advisory Group, which has been chaired by the Greater Washington Board of Trade CEO Jack McDougall, in addition to 6 additional work groups, have been meeting multiple times to move the work of this initiative forward, to push our partners collaboratively, and to put meaningful actions in front of us today. Today, we're going to be reviewing updated funding needs, including a revised Metro budget and financial outlook, in addition to estimated local transit needs. And by the end of today's meeting, I hope that we are going to have some consensus on the investments that will meet the region's needs, which only then can begin the hard work of funding or finding the best funding mechanism to meet those goals. It's pretty clear that focused dialogue by our task force and advisory groups about cost and service efficiencies at Metro has helped contribute to a smaller funding gap than was projected when we first started this effort last June. Those administrative cost savings, coupled with strong ridership gains, are showing several steps in the right direction for regional transit, as we will soon hear. But we cannot let up on the urgency to be able to face these challenges. And I think we can all recognize it is a critical point in our timeline on how we're going to move forward. Before we dive in, though, I want to encourage everyone here to continue to take the opportunity to put our cards on the table and make the best use of this time together. I appreciate everyone's done a great job so far of being both candid and collaborative when we're coming together in these spaces. We've already heard from introduction from our facilitator, Nick Donahue, who has been working very closely with the advisory groups and all of our task force for the last several months. Before we turn to Mr. Donahue, I'm going to turn it back over to my co-chair, Mr. Smedberg, and then we'll move to our first agenda item after that.
Yeah, before we begin today, we'd like to give Randy Clark, the GM of WMATA, an opportunity to update the committee on a few things that are happening there. He and his team have been doing a great job managing WMATA over the last 2 years. And Randy, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it. I think we bombard people a lot with a lot of facts and figures, so just thought I'd take a quick moment and ground everyone on a couple things that are going on and address a couple things. As the chair said, ridership continues to go in the right direction. As you mentioned, we led the country 2 years straight, but we also now led the country in January. I think this week, February's numbers will be posted. We believe we led the country in February, and March is actually currently up. Rail is up 12% weekdays compared to last March and 17% on weekdays compared to last year, right? And Metro bus is up 4% and 2%. So we think we're probably going to lead the country in March as well. Last week, we hit almost 970,000 on this bus and rail. And we're very close back to being 1 million people a day on the system. So that is helping significantly with revenue. It's also helping with safety on the system. The better the system is, or maybe people on it, the safer it is, and parking is up as well. So all things go in the right direction, and that is both federal workers back to the office, but it's also on the weekends. We moved 1 million people, over 1 million people on Saturday and Sunday combined. So it's all across the region really working well. Second thing I want to address, many people know in the media, Secretary Duffy sent me a letter related to Metro's kind of safety security. Just wanted to let everyone know we really appreciate the Secretary's attention to this topic. Obviously, our Metro system plays a big deal for the federal government and just for all the visitors to the National Capital Region. We responded back to Secretary Duffy with all of the information they're looking for. Of note is last year, crime was down 40% year over year. But so far, year to date, we are at a 7-year low for crime. So 7 years, the lowest crime has been on Metro so far this year. We're feeling very good about all of our efforts on fare evasion, how we're doing that enforcement, how we're working with all of our local partners on policing, all of our technology pieces as well. But at the end of the day, we all know safety and security of the system is everything, not just to bring confidence, but actually really from an efficiency point as well. Next thing is I want to highlight this week, staff is going to be doing a revised proposed budget to the board. And we're doing that very clearly that most of our partners are in this room, and we want to be very clear. We understand that there's some serious economic regional challenges. I don't think anyone has the crystal ball what those are going to be yet. And I think we got to just kind of keep our eye on the ball and watch what happens week to week and month to month. But we wanted to make sure you know that we see you, and we want to be as collaborative and be a proactive partner. So in January, we did a revised budget where, because of revenue is out beating forecast, we lifted our budget forecast by 20 million in revenue. But we also believe we have efficiencies that we can still work on. And those aren't efficiencies where someone says, well, why didn't you do that last year? It's never ending trying to modernize Metro. A lot of these are technology driven and efficiency that way. So we're updating the board this week on about $20 million of further efficiencies we want to drive down. Give or take, that's about I don't know, just under 8 million for DC. It's probably 7.2 or something for Maryland, and the remaining would be the Virginia, and then obviously Virginia breaks down. But wanted to really lean into our partners, knowing that you have challenges, and we want to be there working with you. And then last, just take a moment. I see Chair Corman joined, and I just want to really thank Chair Corman and his colleagues in the Maryland House last week. The topic we're really left with now is a capital fiscal cliff, not an operating one. We believe that we've kind of, and Tom will go in detail, feel like we have a pathway forward in solving operating, which we didn't have before. We had a $140 million projected deficit, and I think at Metro, we think that's our responsibility now to close. But the capital cliff is significant, and just wanted to thank Chair Corman for passing his bill last week to move this topic forward. So back to you, Chair. Thank you for the moment.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. And again, thank you to you and your team. Now I'll turn it over to Mr. Donahue, and we'll start our first discussion.
Great, thank you all so much. And before we start discussion, just quickly, we have 3 things on the agenda. Item number 1, though, has multiple parts, and that is the bulk of today's discussion. So when we met last December, we had a lot of discussion about the state of good repair needs at WMATA. We also talked about signaling with rail. And then we had an extended discussion about expansion and modernization, where we got some good feedback from the task force and the members here about some of the things you were kind of looking for from the team and the advisory groups as they've had those discussions since you all last met in December. We're then going to take a little time to talk about local transit needs. WMATA does serve the vast majority of transit riders in this region, but we have 13 other transit operators. And so we want to talk about how we're looking at some of their needs and let you know the work that's ongoing there. And then at the end, kind of just move to kind of the funding discussion that we started last time, but didn't finish. And again, we will start today and not finish today as well, because that will be an extended discussion kind of over the coming months. So as a quick reminder, the clicker and me don't agree. As a quick reminder, we've talked a lot about like the path to world-class transit and what we're looking for here. These are some of the guiding principles that have been influencing the advisory group's work as they've been doing things to prepare for the task force. So again, maximize the existing capacity, drive efficiencies, look at ways to increase ridership, and then also support a future of a growing region with a vibrant economy. And so those are, again, are just some of the guiding principles that we've used throughout this work. But just as a refresher, your first charge to us was to think about what world-class transit means, and this is what we all came up with at that time, or a summary of what we all came up with at that time. I want to take a fair amount of time on this slide here. And again, if you have questions as we go along the way, please just, raise your name tag or turn your microphone on to green so I can, know who wants to ask a question. Just to go back to where we were last fall. So we talked about what it would take to maintain and address the backlog at WMATA. We also looked at what would it take to address signaling and to increase frequency using existing assets on the bus and rail systems. The upfront cost of doing that was $700 to $750 million, starting in FY28, with the assumption that that amount would grow by 3% a year. Importantly, as a part of that discussion, it also assumed the dedicated regional funding and the PREA funding, which is a mix of federal and kind of local match, would grow at 3% a year. Included in this as well was $140 million to fund an operating deficit to allow the maintenance of existing service levels at WMATA. I'm really pleased to report that since we've been with you, the WMATA team has done a lot of really, really good work driving in on this and looking at, are there ways to bring this cost down? And so we are now before you with a number that you can see on this slide that could be as low as $500 million a year and grow at 3% annually. This would not require growth of existing sources that come to WMATA, and it also, because of improved ridership and revenues, as well as a few other factors that Mr. Webster is going to get into, looks at essentially having no operating deficit kind of moving forward. Obviously, as folks have alluded, there's a lot of things kind of going on right now in the region. Luckily, this task force is going to be continuing until September. And so I think by that time, hopefully we'll have a greater sense of what some of those things mean for the future. But with where things stand today, we are looking at potentially having no operating deficit in FY28. And again, you saw that big asterisk that I kind of put by that caveat there. And so we've also brought back several items that are included in this figure on the right to answer, we hope in a responsive way, the questions and direction you all gave us when it came to looking at expansion and modernization. So we clearly heard from folks at that time to look at things that focus on the bus system and enhancing service there. And so we're going to talk about a bus priority concept that would, enhance bus service throughout this region. We also heard look at things that could help drive down cost and to include rail signaling in the funding figures that we're providing. And so we're gonna have a discussion today about rail automation that will help do both of those things, but then also create more capacity in the future on the Metro Rail system without having to address any major rail expansions. So again, it kind of combines something that we need to do and does it in a way where we get additive benefits there. So this is just a summary slide. We're gonna get into each of these kind of items in detail here, but I wanted to just make sure you knew before we talked about each item, kind of what this means overall as we move forward. And clearly, we're going to learn more as the months continue and we understand the situation a little bit better in the region. Any questions before we kind of turn over to Mr. Webster to get into some of the details on the operating budget? All right, Tom.
Thank you, Nick. And again, Tom Webster, Chief of Planning and Performance at Metro, and thank you to the co-chairs under the task force for your time today and continued support. We'll go into a little bit more detail on some of the things that have already been highlighted here, but just with the straight numbers. So actual ridership and fare revenue continue to exceed expectations, even just from a few months ago. Ridership continues to grow, and as was mentioned, we're now 47 months consecutive of year-over-year monthly ridership growth. Customers are now taking more trips all days of the week, and we've seen strong growth this year in the traditional office commute hours, as well as in medium and long distance trips, where, and the reason that's particularly relevant, customers pay a higher fare for longer distance trips on the rail. And we've also seen, as the GM mentioned, particularly strong growth among federal employees, especially this past month. So in February, we revised our ridership and revenue outlook for this fiscal year and for the next two. And you see on the right-hand side, essentially adding 20 million in next fiscal year's forecast and 29 million in the following year. That obviously goes right to the bottom line and helps balance the budget. On the next slide, so we also, again, as was mentioned, remain laser focused on modernization, improving service for customers, efficiencies, and trying to maximize the value of our system. A lot of this is associated with reducing the unit cost of providing service for our customers. So just briefly here on the rail system in our FY26 proposed budget, we're including returning the impacts and implications of returning the rail system to automatic train operations. Of course, we've already done that on the red line with the remainder of the system scheduled to come on later this spring. This is important for a few reasons. One, very clearly some direct benefits for customers in terms of faster trips, more reliable trips, and improved quality of the ride in the system. But then from a cost standpoint, it is substantially more efficient to run in automatic train operations as compared to manual operations. The amount of time that it takes to run end to end on each individual line shrinks. So for example, on the red line, we can operate the same frequency in automatic train operations with 2 fewer trains over the course of the day. So that results in direct savings. And in our budget proposal for 26, we propose reinvesting that and improving frequency, particularly in areas and segments of the system where we're seeing the highest levels of growth and potential crowding going into our next fiscal year. Also in our 26 budget is the implementation of our Better Bus Network redesign. And similarly here, the intent is to improve service and connectivity and access to opportunity and jobs for our customers. But it has a similar benefit in improving the unit cost of service delivered. We set out with the intention of building a network that would use the same level of projected resources, to provide more service. And you see some of the stats here on this slide. We're actually able to provide substantially more service to customers for less money than we were previously projecting as a result of some of the efficiency gains in redesigning both the map and the schedules for the service. And then finally on this slide, in Metro Access, our Abilities Ride program, which is an alternative for Metro Access eligible customers, that is desirable for customers and that it's more flexible, but it's also cheaper, less expensive for Metro to provide those trips. So again, we're seeing a reduction in cost in Metro Access for the same or even more service for customers. On this next slide, so this is some of the detail on what Nick covered a few minutes ago. Back in the last summer and through the fall, we were projecting a structural operating budget deficit of about 140 million in FY28, which was the base year for the DMV Moves effort. As a result of both the improving and continuing to improve ridership and revenue projections, reduction in costs as a result of those modernization and efficiency investments. We're now projecting a 28 budget that assumes 3% growth in jurisdictional contributions, but has zero deficit in the current forecast. Of course, this is subject to a lot of assumptions, and there are some significant uncertainties in this outlook, but compared to where we were 8 months ago, much more favorable outlook for FY28. On the next slide, and as Randy mentioned earlier, the capital challenge remains. That value of dedicated funding in PREA that were set at fixed amounts since their initial days continues to erode with inflation. We will reach dedicated funding debt capacity limit in the outer years of our 6-year period, currently projecting around FY29, where you see on this graph the significant drop off in the amount of money available for capital reinvestment.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. And again, I just want to drill on a few more points that he noted. Again, as a reminder, we are here because the dedicated regional funding and other things have reached their bonding capacity, or will, reach it just in a few years. And that is one of the, the major challenges is where you see that big drop off there. And as Tom noted, we have, I think, very positive news in the operating budget. Clearly, that caveat that we put there, I think the really positive thing from my perspective is if we hadn't seen these improvements in ridership, which again, let's just be very clear, bucks national trends where you increase fares and ridership then continues to increase. You typically see flat or slightly declining ridership when fares go up, and we are seeing the fares went up 12.5%, and you are seeing increased ridership with that, which again is why we are beating those projections. So again, we're in a much more positive place now with the forecast for 28, even with some of these uncertainties, because with absent those actions, we'd have the $140 million deficit that would be projected for 28 with some of the uncertainty that we're currently facing in this region. So I think it's just a really good outcome and a good place for us to be. And again, hopefully in the coming months, we are obviously going to monitor what is going on and try to understand what those impacts may be in terms of the ridership projections. I think at this time, we're just candidly too early from our perspective to be able to make a good set of projections moving forward from that place. Chair Randall.
Thank you, Mr. Donahue. I just want to make sure I think I heard you say that the budget going forward assumes 3% growth from localities. Did you say that? Was that 3% growth already something that was agreed to and built into what the locality? So this is not, so localities should know that already. This is not new for them.
That's correct.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Randall. I'll do a quick reminder because we've learned this over some of our last meetings. If we all hit the buttons, the green light, you can only handle so much at one time. And if you have a question or comment, if you turn your table tent up, that'll help us flag that and see that. So just want to turn to see if there were any other questions or comments before we start the next part. All right, Nick.
Thank you. And so I want to talk a little bit about some of the updated state of good repair assumptions and the proposal that's being provided here. This is an alternative concept to what we discussed last year. And so what you can see on this slide are three different lines. The red line is effectively what happens if that capital funding plan that was the last slide Tom talked about goes into effect, where we have the capital budget essentially shrink by about $1 billion a year. And again, it would stay at that lower level moving forward for about a 25-year period, because there would be no borrowing capacity from the funds that WMATA can use for financing. In that, what you can see is the state of good repair backlog grows from about $4 billion to a much, much larger number into the future. And what that effectively means is all the progress that we've been able to make since the 2018 dedicated funding would essentially be reversed over time. And we would end up actually in a place that is worse than where we were before the 2018 funding was put in place. At the bottom of the slide, what you'll see is it looks orangish to me, line here, which represents the scenario we talked about last fall. What that scenario was seeking to do was to eliminate over a 25-year period WMATA's state of good repair backlog. And that was going to get it down to zero and effectively keep it there into the future. That is the scenario that required the $340 million upfront, but also growing the existing revenue sources. What we're coming back to today was something that does not require the growth in those existing revenue sources. I'm going to show you what that means, because me just kind of saying it, I don't think actually puts the finer point on it. But we are no longer proposing that we make the level of investment needed to eliminate the state of good repair backlog at WMATA. If you look at transportation agencies across the country, you don't really see anybody who has gotten rid of their state of good repair backlog. Instead, what you do is you get to a manageable place where you can provide a high level of reliable performance, and then very importantly, sustain it over time. And so, like, if you think about where we are now with WMATA, we have gotten to a place with the 2018 funding where we're providing that better level of performance and higher levels of reliability, but we cannot sustain it. And so what we are proposing with this alternative concept is a fair amount of less funding over time, particularly in the outer years. And that means that there will be a backlog. It will be strategically managed by WMATA, but importantly, it will be below where we are today in terms of that backlog. So we will be maintaining the performance and condition that we have today, and we can sustain it over time. And ideally, that means no one is in this room in 8 to 10 years having the discussion that we are having right now, because we have put in place a state of good repair program that can address the needs for the foreseeable future. So now I want to talk about, like, what is the difference in this funding? And so I know those numbers are small there, but it is that is 2028 there on the one side, and 2050. What you can see is in the beginning, the amount of funding that's being requested is substantially similar, but because of the compounding effect of the request last fall with fixed sources growing at 3% plus new money, it is dramatically less that we are asking in this alternative concept moving forward. So in 2040, this is $350 million less a year. In 2050, this is more than $750 million less a year. So I know when I say, oh, it means we don't grow certain things at 3%, kind of sounds like, well, that doesn't sound like that big of a deal. What does that mean? It is a very, very big deal, and the impacts for the region in terms of the amount of funding that would be necessary are significant here. And so I really want to give the WMATA team a lot of credit for going back, really kind of working on this and saying, okay, if we don't eliminate, what is a different place where we can be, where we can kind of maintain our performance and, again, maintain it over time. And so really, really big changes there in the amount of funding that is being offered, which will have which will have a very significant impact over time as we talk about how to solve this, as to what the impact would be as you all have these discussions at home and also with any legislative body you might need to have them with.
Hey, Nick, I think I just had a comment on that. I appreciate acknowledging it. I don't want to sound like we got to solve with the green line. I think we want to really present what the minimum is versus the ideal. So I don't want anyone to walk away, and because obviously more gets us, not just more for Metro, gets us different outcomes. The green gets us where we can still run a really good system, but we can't get to all the overall goals we all have. And so it's just trying to be pragmatic So I just don't want, I don't want Nick to negotiate against himself here a little bit, so.
No, thank you, Mr. Clark. That's a very fair point. So this, again, what this will do, this alternative concept, is keep the state of good repair backlog in a reliable place. And it also does include the two things we're getting ready to talk about, which are responsive. I hope you all will view as responsive, and that's going to be a discussion topic, to what we talked about last month or in December at our last meeting when it came to expansion and modernization. But it does not include a lot of the things, as Mr. Clark kind of hinted at there, that we talked about last December. It includes two, and we talked about 8 or 10 things at that December meeting. And so I really appreciate that reminder, Randy. So before we, or just in summary here, again, we're going to walk through this. This is what makes up the alternative ask that we're bringing to you all here today. When I look at kind of that box on the left, to me, this is the need to do. Because what we're talking about here is replacing buses, replacing rail cars, taking care of track, addressing the signaling and automation of the Metro Rail system. And then we also have another concept that we want to discuss, which is bus priority, which has real benefits for this region. It does fall in kind of that expansion and modernization category. We also believe rail automation is responsive to that. And so these are the two items that we did not talk about last December that we are bringing back to you all as kind of, this is how we believe we can find ways to drive costs down, to enhance the capacity of the system, and to, do things beyond just taking care of what we have today. So before I give it to Mr. Webster to talk about rail automation, I want us to see if there are any questions about this revised funding concept. Because again, there's a lot of changes in there, and I know I hit with a lot of information.
Mr. Collins?
One question I had was, in your evaluation, how are you looking at population increases within the region? And how does that weigh into future potential ridership? Because my jurisdiction in particular, looking at the future is more a focus of where we anticipate, the impact of potential ridership as a result of Southern Maryland Rapid Transit. The figures that we saw as an example creates a potential ridership that will go directly to WMATA, a population of approximately 500,000 people in the future. And so I was wondering if those type of numbers are a part of your evaluation.
No, thank you for the question, Mr. Collins. So those numbers are through the TPB forecast that are put in place and adopted by TPB. Those are certainly taken into account in the evaluation here. And so as we look at the Metro Rail and its future kind of capacity and the potential for crowding, which Mr. Webster is going to get into here in the future, that is all baked in to some of that thought work and the evaluation that was done there. And then the bus priority concept that we are presenting is also taking that into account. I would say that still has more work to do, because at this time, we would not be saying it's this route versus that route. It would much more be a discussion of, does the region want to invest in this concept to deliver this type of bus priority investments and lower operating cost as a region? And then we would work with the region to figure out where those specific investments would be made.
Any other questions or comments? I'm going to throw one in just to make sure people have a solid understanding on the state of good repair. So one of the, I appreciate the hard work that went into calculating and figuring out what this could look like. How does this proposed level of state of good repair backlog management compare with other transit systems, so we can try to think through what, are we aligning ourselves to a baseline? Are we better than a baseline to other districts? I think it both represents a, frankly, realistic interpretation of saying eliminating all backlog is not going to actually happen or be feasible. So this is probably a much more realistic approach. But could you help paint the picture a bit of how is this pegged to what we see in other transit agencies?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Allen. I think importantly, our region's transit system is in very, very good shape compared to national peers. The result of the investment that this region and the federal government have made, what we're talking about here is essentially getting better from there and improving performance and reliability and a long-term, predictable, sustainable state of good repair approach. I think that is really would be the envy of our peers across the country. That said, there are international places that achieve approaching 100% performance, and we'll get into a little bit of that further here. But there are certainly trade-offs in balancing with the minimum amount required to achieve those goals, as opposed to the more ideal investment level.
And just to add to Mr. Webster's point, that so just not a WMATA example, but in the region example, as some of you may know, I used to be the Deputy Secretary of Transportation in Virginia. Virginia has a provision in its budget where they can take all the dollars that exist and use it for maintenance and repair if they need to. And so they can take it away from other kind of construction or programs of that nature. They did that to an extent, but they did not. They left several $billion in the kind of construction and expansion side because the cost of kind of basically driving, I think right now they're at 95% of bridges in a state of good repair. Getting that to 100 and maintaining that was so costly, that kind of extra that final 5%, that it didn't make sense for VDOT in that particular effort with those bridges. And so it's something you see in a lot of transit agencies is kind of managing, and transportation agencies is managing it at that appropriate level. And we actually at one point lowered the target from 98 to 95 because maintaining it at 98 would have required a massive infusion in like 8 years down the road to have stayed at that level of a state of good repair.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Mr. Clark or Mr. Webster, this additional frequent bus and bus priority, tell us a little bit about why that is so important to advancing the transit system in this region and why it's on the slide here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think really good question. So I think, one comment on what Tom was saying first, which is, listen, I don't want Metro to sound like we're negotiating ourselves here, but getting a little less money and having that indexing and predictability is better than getting a little bit more money with no predictability and indexing, right? And that is what's so important, because we're not talking about an annualized cycle. We're talking like 20, 30 years of planning and how to then push that across cash flow management, stuff that you all have to do, whether you're a CAO, county supervisor, or a state official, and we just lack that at Metro because we don't have our ability to have move our taxes. So that's the key point. On the bus stuff, I think it's one, we heard loud and clear from everyone on these task force and the advisory groups that the future of this region to carry more people on transit is clearly going to be bus. Building rail in America is incredibly expensive. Now, I think there are some serious opportunities as a country to reform how we do that, whether it's through NEPA, whether it's through standardization, a bunch of other stuff that, quite frankly, as a transit industry, we want to partner with the new administration on and hopefully make some progress on that. But we need to be able to build cheaper than we build today. There's no question about that. On the bus side, there's the flexibility. So we're never going to replace, like Tom mentioned, say the red line. You cannot replace the Metro red line ever with any flexible service. It's an incredible people mover capacity. But we can have the flexibility of bus to add a lot more people on transit if we're willing to use those assets correctly and use the roadway correctly. And the question is, where are those need to happen? How do they work together? And then how do we use advanced technology to make that even better? So buses have to get cheaper too. They're getting a little out of control as well. That's a national kind of supply issue. But take that out of the question. This here is what we heard loud and clear from the group. It's also what we heard from 40,000 customers when we did Better Bus Network redesign. And as transit professionals, we know this is the regional solution. And we can do it scalable. So if this group agrees that bus frequency needs to get some extra funding, we can work with you all and say, hey, 25 million in FY27 gets you this, 40 million 2 years later gets you this. I also think, Mr. Chair, the last part of this is it gives us a chance as a region to think about synergies. And some of these work groups are working on this. I fundamentally believe we have room for our region to cooperate more on bus service, whether that's procuring buses, whether it's doing overhauls on buses, scheduling our service, training our operators. I think there's room for more efficiency to get more people on bus in our region. And you know, we got to get back to having, I think Tom and I've talked, we think we as a region should be handling 500,000 people one day on Metro Bus. And right now we're doing very well. Probably today we might do 420,000, but there's room for more people in the bus system.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. And Mr. Clark, just to educate everyone, Delegate Corman's bill, I believe, does have some form of indexing or tied to CPI or.
Yeah, I guess I defer to my understanding. It's tied to rebaselining from 2019, I think, with indexing. If I got that correct, Mr. Chair, 3%. And I think there's a healthy debate if 3% is the right number. CPIW, construction index. Quite frankly, I personally would rather us get to some kind of agreement and have that predictability than spend 3 years debating the indexing measure. But there has, you know, if 3% is the right thing, then we have. And Metro also has to be responsible for managing its money. And you know, that's one of the things I hope that with the stuff Tom brought up with the operating budget, you have faith that we are taking that serious about operating with every dollar aggressively.
Thanks. I think I saw Sarah Klein is next.
Yeah, thank you. This is just really a clarifying question. I think following up on what Mr. Collins was asking, the left-hand side talks a lot about state of good repair. I'm curious whether that would include what the federal transit program would refer to as core capacity, which is investments. What basically when you've got too much crowding in the core, it's not really state of good repair if, you know, Metro Center platforms can't handle the crowds, for example. So do we have the flexibility within that left-hand box to address those kinds of issues?
Well, Ms. Klein, thank you for that question. That's a perfect segue. And so we are getting ready to walk into the rail automation discussion and bus priority discussions. These are things that will do more than state of good repair. When it comes to rail automation, so much of that involves replacing the signaling system, which is also a part of state of good repair, which is why it's kind of in that one box combined with replacing buses and doing other things, because it's just so much of it is state of good repair. But there are two kind of key proposals we have before you that will do things beyond just taking care of the existing system. And before we get into that, I'll.
Senator Surville.
Yeah, so I'm watching the presentation and not feeling like I was very listened to at the last meeting. So my recollection is we talked a lot about trying to consolidate bus systems to try and find efficiencies. I haven't seen a single mention of that in the presentation or any of the future slides. You know, when you look at the history of the region, we had a bunch of different bus systems and they got consolidated and they got deconsolidated. And then we went from bus to rail because that's what people wanted, was they wanted rail, not buses. And anyways, it seems to me one of the most obvious ways to find efficiencies is to consolidate bus systems. And it just seems to have completely fallen off. And I remember myself, Chair Randall, some others said that needs to be part of this conversation. It's disappeared. Secondly, I remember last meeting, one of the things I articulated, I thought a few others did, was that in order to generate public support to support the kinds of investments we need to be talking about system expansion. And you all had, I think, 3 different choices. One was like, do nothing. One was like, do something plus a little. And the other one was expansion or something. And you know, I went through this fight 15 years ago in my district, trying to generate support for bus rapid transit. Nobody wanted it. They wanted rail. We sold the rail expansion. We sold the bus rapid transit as a way to get to rail expansion. Because if we'd just gone for a bus expansion, we wouldn't have had political support for that. And when I look around the region, at least my part of the region, and I know the DC region pretty well, it strikes me as leaving the existing rail system in place and telling everybody else they got to ride a bus creates a massive equity problem, because the parts of the Northern Virginia that have rail service are the nicer areas, the higher income areas for the most part. There's some parts of that DC that don't matter, but in Northern Virginia at least, it's a lot of the haves keep their rail system. Everybody else has to ride a bus. And that I don't think sells well politically. And I understand with the current administration, there's some pessimism about the next 3 years, but I know when they planned the metro system in the 1950s and 60s, they weren't thinking about the next president, they were thinking about the next 5 administrations. And that's how I like to think of things. And it strikes me that this country, you know, whether we can see it or not, at some point is going to wake up and realize that the other major metropolitan areas of the world have much nicer systems than we have for moving people around. Whether it's, you know, Japan, London, Paris, Munich, wherever. And I don't know why it is we need to constantly settle for having, you know, less nice things than the rest of the world because, you know, in the current political moment, it seems like there's not enough money. And I just think politically, I'm not sure a lot of people are going to want to pay more money just for more buses. And I said that last time. It seems to me we've gone back to this, just look at bus rapid transit, nothing else thing. And the core capacity point is exactly on point, right? We're about to throw, the system was jammed before the ridership declined downtown. We're about to throw, you know, the bus rapid transit on Route 1, we're going to open up in about 10 years, going to throw another, I don't know how many thousands of people at the system. Plus we got high-speed rail coming up and down the I-95 corridor, which is going to bring a lot more people on rail into the system. I assume Mark's going to continue to expand. I mean, we're going to keep throwing more and more people at the system until it jams. And then we're going to say, oh, it's going to take 20 years to expand it. We need to be planning for the expansion now and not wait until the system is completely gummed up. And I just feel like that piece of the discussion has just vanished.
Thanks, Senator. I'll try to hit your last point, if I can, a little bit. I'm going to turn to Nick to talk about some of the meat on your first point around the bus consolidation. Part of what's coming up in the next few slides should be starting to get a little bit more at your last point. I know I've talked about this, and I think you and I share this. I can't go to my constituents. I can't go to the city and say, I want to write a bigger check for the same thing you already got. So we have to talk about how we are expanding service, reliability, speed, efficiency. What I think the first half of the conversation thus far has been about how it's trying to be responsive to a bit of the price point gasp that we've heard of how we're going to meet this. And so pushing on a lot of different places to bring that number down and working with a lot of those, the task forces and advisory groups to try to figure out how you fine tune that and prioritize. I do believe that we will be hearing just a little bit more about how some of the investments recommended here will lead towards more rail service, lead towards faster and more bus service. It has been on here though, and you accurately point out, there is nothing in here that talks about expansion of new rail stations and new rail lines. 100% you're correct on that. But I do believe that we'll be talking a bit more about improved and growing service on both rail and bus. And then maybe we can keep teasing that out more. Because I think for all of us that, especially anybody who's got their name on a ballot, it's very hard to go out to your constituents and ask for a bigger and bigger check for the same thing you already got. And that's a big part of what this process is trying to lay out both a vision, but also we've got to be able to talk about not just how we are making good decisions for the next 5 administrations, as you say, but thinking about how we also are getting a community to buy into the aspiration and the goals of where we got to go. But let me ask Nick if he can add some about the bus consolidation specifics you had.
Yes, thank you, Senator Sherville, one for coming today and also for your question. So just on the bus consolidation, we established 6 working groups that we talked about last fall that are working on a variety of issues. This includes fare integration, the wayfinding, shared services, shared procurements. And so what you all can't see yet, because we're not at a place where we have deliverables, but we should be by the May meeting, is those folks, all the operators have been coming together, working on this issue and looking at, we believe there are all these savings here. Let's actually get down and explore them, understand what the hurdles are and whether or not those savings are what we think they are. So for example, and this is very basic, but just to get it, like call centers. Right now, many different bus operators have a number on their sign that you can call to get information about where the bus is. It makes no sense that this region has a bunch of different call centers there. So what we're working through right now is how can you consolidate that to create efficiencies and cost savings? They're also looking at when it comes to fleet management and bus procurement, how can we work together and effectively take some of the steps that are in the direction of consolidation to look for those efficiencies that could be realized in the same way that a consolidation of those different systems would provide. So I want to, because we're not talking about it today, I probably should have made some remarks at the beginning that at the May meeting, we'll have that discussion on all 6 of those aspects. But I want to assure you that work is in flight and underway. And so we will be coming back with that. Whether or not, I can't predict to you today whether or not the results will say you should do exactly X versus Y, but we are going to come back to you with action plans there that will look at ways that we can find efficiencies with these different operators in this region. And I think Mr. Mercer.
Just real quick, because I know there's other comments. I mean, but that update in May, to be clear, will not show you what consolidation looks like. And if that's something that the members of DMV Moves want this effort to look at, that is instruction that we would look from the task force. From the beginning of this effort, the feedback has been that is not something everyone wants us to take a look at and articulate. But if I hear from Fairfax County that, yes, we want to look at what folding the connector into Metro looks like, or ART or DASH, we would have to bring on the resources to do that. It will outlive the life of this wrapping up this fall. It will take a little bit longer, but we will deliver that. Absent that, our charge to the operators has been, please get together and find ways to bear those types of efficiencies that Nick articulated. And I will tell you that that has not been met with open arms by all of the operators. Well, we ordered different buses, and this bus is a little bit different than that. And, we can't use the same, app for buying. We can't all treat kids the right way. And it's the same paradigm that this region has faced for 30 years while we haven't been able to achieve those efficiencies. So it's a two-part thing. One, we can do a deeper dive and look at what true consolidation would look like, but that's going to have to come from this task force telling us to do that. That's one. And two, absent that, we really need the encouragement of the task force to your operators to say, look, prices are increasing across the board. We know there's ways to drive efficiencies. We need you to deliver some solutions as a part of this process. Because there has been a sense that if we just wait this task force out, it will go away and we'll go back to business as usual.
Thanks. Let me turn to Dr. Henlow.
Senator, I hear what you're saying. And at my first reaction, when I saw this deck on Friday, my first reaction was like also to feel like a little frustrated and disappointed about how many compromises have already been made along the way based on where the conversations at DMV Moves first started. But I think as I kind of sat with the material for longer, I realized a couple key things, not just, Randy's point about if we want to expand rail, we actually have to learn how to do it without the assumption of infinite money, which is the only way we know how to do it right now. We're just not ready. We're not ready to have that conversation because we haven't figured out how to do it the way the rest of the world does it in order to have nice things. So that challenge aside, a key takeaway for me of the Blue, Orange, Silver capacity study is that we cannot expand the system without addressing core capacity issues and modernizing the system. In order to get ready to do the things that we want to do, we need to modernize Metro. We do not want to invest billions or trillions as a region to build yesterday's transit. We're already doing enough of that. I stopped myself from actually saying it. We need to be building tomorrow's transit. We can't afford to build any other kind if we're planning to be thinking 1 or 2 generations ahead. And so I view a scenario that fully commits to modernization as one that is still thinking big and ambitiously for the long term and offers people something new to be excited about. At the end of this scenario, no one's Metro Rail experience would be anything like what the Metro Rail experience is like today. It will be like when you go down into the platform in Hong Kong or Shanghai or Paris and you're like, oh my God, what is this? It's going to be something different. So we're not just asking people for more money for the same thing. And I would argue, I think that, we can get to the same point on the bus side as well. My bus journey I'm riding in a lot more these days than I did in the past, in part because of the places I need to go. But I'm realizing that also is an area where technology is changing really rapidly, right? And so if you look at what we're going through just right now with, thinking about how to electrify the bus fleet, the capital investments that need to be made in that, the technology is changing at the same time so much that it's making it hard to figure out exactly how to do the pivot. And so there could be some benefits to us as a region for not actually being first out the gate to get married to a specific technology a specific set of routes and exactly what we're going to do. This could be a good time to make strategic investments and then take a deep breath and see where we are in one capital plan life cycle.
Thank you very much. Mr. Elrich?
So I don't feel like there's one set of problems that are universal for all of us. I mean, in Montgomery County, our biggest problem is the transit the red line we have basically was designed and built to serve downtown DC. And there's very little to serve Montgomery County. Very little to serve Montgomery County. We have no east-west connectivity. If I want to get to the west side from the east side, I got to go through downtown DC and come back out. We're going through the drama of the Purple Line right now. When we saw the Purple Line studies and we saw the time studies that came back with it, BRT would have performed the same as the Purple Line. The time between stop to stop was the same. The difference back then was a mere $1 billion. BRT priced out at about $700 million. The Purple Line priced out at $1.7 billion. And we picked the expensive option. We would have been over and done with building a bus rapid transit system, over and done with, if we had gone with that rather than doing the Purple Line the way we did it. And the key factor in what made it the same was if you gave the same right-of-way treatments to rail that you would give to BRT, they perform the same. Rail's not going to run 60 miles an hour down the street like George Avenue or or East-West Highway. It's going to do about 35 or 40, but it's going to do it uninterrupted. It gets signal priority, and people, can get on and off the way you would normally get on a train. So I don't feel any fascination with going to saying everything needs to be metro, and if it's not metro, it's somehow a secondary service. And I've been on the subways in other countries. I've also ridden incredible surface transportation, whether it's either bus rapid transit or light rails or trolleys, that all function better than anything we do here, mostly because they give them dedicated places to travel and it's no longer mixed up in traffic. So I don't think we should be throwing I would not mortgage my future to say everything needs to go into Metro Rail. I think integration is important for us, and I think investment in bus rapid transit is important for all of us to do. We could get to Virginia if we could get the lane across the bridge, and we could get to Virginia from Bethesda to Tyson's Corner with a bus. Building that with the train, good luck. But let's do both.
Thank you very much. I see Jeff McKay up next. Let me turn to you.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. First, thank you, Mark, for acknowledging a lane on the bridge. If we could just get the bridge. But in all seriousness, I want to reflect back on, what was said a minute ago in response to Senator Surville, and I want to be supportive of what's being presented here, because I get frustrated too when I travel internationally and see systems in other places. And here we are in our nation's capital, and our system struggles to compete with a lot of systems internationally, but they're funded at the top. And what we're talking about here, and I'll just speak to Virginia's problem for a moment, is what is the capacity of local governments to be able to support this system long term? And that doesn't mean you just get everything. And rail expansion is very expensive. And it also has other ramifications for existing rail. When the Silver Line was added in Fairfax County, it had a negative effect on throughput of trains from the yellow and the blue lines. And that expansion actually hurt some transit ridership growth in another part of the county. And so just heavy rail everywhere is not only is it not economically feasible, it might not be from a technology standpoint the smartest thing to do. I appreciate the focus on bus, because I'm going to reject the notion that it's the have and have nots. And if we think about it that way, we're not going to grow metro ridership, because for many people, the start of their metro journey on rail begins on a bus system. And we run specialized bus system that is door to door, that people pay a high cash premium to be able to ride. Why? Because it's safe, it's accessible, it's fast, it gets them to work on time. And, to not think about the places where people are coming into the system, is a huge mistake in my mind. And let's think about getting people into the system through a sophisticated bus system that can service not just our regions and our local economies, but also service to provide ridership increases on the transit system itself and on heavy rail. And so, I just want to be pragmatic here and say, I think we should be talking about bus and not separating the two as if one carries one particular type of passenger and one carries a different type of passenger, because sadly, that's how the system was built, which is why buses were left to the end, which is go figure it out, guys. Good luck. We're not going to give you bus only lanes or some of the other things that we're planning now in corridors of significance. And if we're going to think forward, we got to think about how bus is a part of our system and treat it fairly, the same way that we treat the rail system. And so, I'm particularly happy with the approach that we're taking here. I do think, lastly, in terms of selling this to people, I understand nice, shiny things. Groundbreakings are great for selling things to people. But what I hear mostly from my constituents over more than a decade has been, can you just get the system to work better? Can we make sure the trains are on time? Can we get the core capacity issues fixed so that we can run more trains through? Can we make sure that crime is down? Can we manage costs on it? And you're going to get people back into the system just by guaranteeing them the system is dramatically improved. And we look at the ridership numbers of people coming back now and look at the customer service responses that people are giving. And so I don't think we should just think about success as how big can we grow the system, how expensive can we make it. I think we also have to think about how much better the system is today than it was a few years ago. And the promise, at least to my constituents, is to make sure Metro runs as best and as efficiently as it possibly can, and that we have the feeder bus systems that are sophisticated and carry people into the system to grow ridership. And I don't have a problem with that. I mean, I think that's where we are, and I think that's what we should be talking about and focusing on. And so I just want to be supportive of, what was presented and just put a little pragmatism on it.
All right, appreciate that. And this has been a perfect conversation as we then kick back over to Nick here for this, where I think we're going to hear about that, as well as how these recommendations can specifically improve service and reliability, hit all those items. So Nick, let me kick it back over to you now.
Well, no, thank you, Chair Allen. And so what we're getting ready, that was a great conversation. We're going to, at the end of this set of slides, what you all were starting to talk about there is exactly the discussion we want to have in depth. So we have two concepts here that we're going to go through. One that deals with rail and improving the capacity, safety, and reliability of the rail system, and another that deals with bus priority and improving travel times, making buses more reliable and increasing frequency. And so the point of both of these is we need to move more people on transit in this region so this region's economy can keep growing and remain vibrant well into the future. And so we're going to talk about both of those things. Mr. Webster is going to walk through rail automation and what that means. Like it's not just that the trains drive themselves. There's a whole host of other things related to that in terms of what it means for the capacity of the system. And then I'm going to give some discussion on bus priority and how that can improve travel times and what it can mean for kind of increased frequency. And so with that, Mr. Webster, I'd turn it over to you.
Thank you, Nick. So as Nick just said, our region's transit system faces several challenges, and they're grouped here and framed as in three categories: safety, reliability, and capacity. For safety, fundamentally, we have an ongoing challenge of trespassing incidents. So people in the track, in the roadway, regardless of the cause or the reason for that trespassing, the incidents result in injuries, loss of life, trauma for our operators and first responders, and then severe acute delays for customers when those things occur. Our current system design essentially is open in stations, and that makes prevention of trespassing incidents near impossible. Our legacy signaling infrastructure, as we've discussed, is aging and unreliable, causing an increasing number of delays. Because the system is no longer the global standard, it is difficult to obtain parts and to maintain the system. And this challenge is growing and will continue to grow until it is updated and modernized. And then on system capacity, as we were just discussing, the current system's concept of operations is constrained by limitations in the legacy signaling system design, bottlenecks in our physical infrastructure, so particularly where trains, different lines share the same, different trains share the same line, apologies. And there's resulting from those constraints, a lack of flexibility in how we are able to deliver service. And again, as was just discussed, alternatives to significantly add capacity, such as some of the concepts we reviewed in the blue, orange, silver capacity and reliability study, are very expensive, very challenging and time consuming to plan, design, and construct. So on this next slide, fully automated rail systems have three big components. Modern signal systems that control train movements and operation. So that's wayside or along the track. Vehicles that are compatible with those systems, and then a system to prevent access to tracks using platform screen doors and other technology. Each of these components are interrelated. Modern communication-based train control systems must control all of the aspects of the train's operation. Rail cars use onboard CBTC systems to communicate with those wayside systems and equipment. And both the system and rail cars must interact with platform screen doors to ensure reliable operation.
Mr. Webster, before you go on, we just want a point of information. You mentioned the reliability of the signaling system and how integral that is to, say, rail automation. Just to Senator Serval's point, give us an idea of how long that takes from, say, design to, implementation in terms of planning and, having a new system in place.
Implementation of, thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. Implementation
Of, say, an updated or new signaling system.
Yes. So typically and we're just getting ready to talk about some of our international peers. Typically, they're built in phases and segments with a planning period, a design period, and then construction. And so we're talking probably a 20 to 25 year time period for the whole system, but increments built in more quickly than that and turned on in segments. I think really importantly here, again, to the discussion of construction costs in this country and this region, and there's strong opportunity cost here. If we take a very long time, it's much more expensive, and we don't get the benefits and the value as soon. So part of what we're looking at in program planning is how do we get to construction faster and to those benefits faster than maybe typical in major rail construction projects.
Thank you.
So over the last decade or more, automation has really become the global standard for transit projects. New rail systems and rail lines are almost exclusively now being built internationally with using full automation. Airports around the world and in our region have pioneered this technology. The oldest systems have really been operating for decades and have proven to be very reliable for airport use. Retrofits of existing legacy and historic transit lines for full automation are now also increasingly common. So that's the scenario we face here in our region. So agencies that need to invest to replace and upgrade their signaling system typically use that opportunity to modernize and move to full automation. There's also a connection to the vehicles and the timing of replacement and retrofit of vehicles. So there's a lot to learn from our peers internationally on implementation of what are essentially large-scale retrofits of signaling systems. And again, we're not unique in facing these challenges and the opportunities. Most legacy rail transit systems across the globe are considering similar challenges. So automated systems nearly eliminate deaths and injuries from trespassing incidents, fully automated ones. They offer a safer operation by eliminating human error from the system. The global standard systems also use new technology with a much smaller footprint, which reduces the amount of equipment that needs to be maintained and replaced over time, and also achieves much more consistent on-time performance. The uptime or the time in operation for these systems is much higher than legacy antiquated systems. And systems who've gone to full automation achieve approaching 99 to 100% on-time performance and reliability. Really importantly here, increased reliability also means more capacity. So fully automated systems can provide more frequent service, move more trains per hour through existing infrastructure, adding capacity and efficiently using the system's assets for service.
Tom, before you go on, I just want to add a couple of comments to this. So I've been in this field my entire career. I've been very fortunate to be on a lot of the top systems in the world, both in Asia and Europe. I think right now we are the best system in the country, and we should be proud of what we have here. To a little bit like Chair McKay said, we really do have a really good system here. That's not to say there aren't better ones in the world, clearly, and there's a variety of factors for that. You know, if you're in Singapore on a rich island that's all dense, without transit, there is no island that works, right? And Seoul is similar in places like that. We are now probably into the European tier, but because Europe's not all monolithic, there's some European systems that are not amazing, but people think because it's in Europe it's amazing, and there's some European systems that are amazing. Our goal, though, is to get to that top tier. Our only way to do that is to go to rail automation. We're never going to get really much better than we are today. There's a little bit we can still work on, but we're not going to get to the highest level of performance and the best use of our assets without this. So a good example, just to put like some tangible things, on our red line, we have, give or take, approximately 30 train control rooms. So these would be, and board members have been out on tours, and we're always happy to take anyone out that would like to see one, but it'd be a room built into the tunnel structure that has old computer equipment in it. Depending on the red line, it could be from, like, quite frankly, the 70s. And it works, it's safe, it's that way, but clearly we can't buy more of that. When we go to this type of technology, we would reduce 30 of those rooms, and all that stuff would be done in a data center, just like that. So there's not only 30 rooms we don't have to maintain and look after with water and heat and cooling, it's all that equipment. And now we have a data center. And that's the kind of world we're moving to. So it's like tolling. No one would open up a new toll road and put booths out there because it's all done via your phone, license plate reader, all that kind of stuff. That's all we're talking about, is moving very rapidly to what really is today. So if you're a brand new system anywhere in the world, you would never build a heavy rail system that doesn't do this. And this is not done as a nice to have. The lower income countries of the world all do it this way because it's so much more efficient, right? So you take a country like Greece. Greece just put a brand new line in place, and their GDP is probably still 50% higher than the lowest state in our country of GDP. And they still would do this because it's the right way to go about it. So I just want to make sure from alignment, this isn't a nice to have. We're going to do this at some point. The question is this group the one to move it forward or not? The last part of this is safety. We never stop talking about safety. That's what we talk about internally all day long. If we want to be the safest system possible, we got to keep people away from where the trains are. Our number one safety issue at Metro, hands down on rail, is people entering the roadway where they're not allowed to be. And that is intentional, where someone is trying to harm themselves or trespassing. And either way, some are obviously more tragic than others. They all impact reliability of service significantly. And so Senator Servo just walked out on, oh, there he is there. What we believe a really important way to solve our blue, orange, silver capacity issue that the senator brought up is with technology. We will never be able to run enough trains through what we call the Roslyn Tunnel, even though it actually is all the way from Stadium Armory to Roslyn. It just got named that, without upgrading our signaling system and getting to a higher level of reliability. There's nothing else we can do with that tube. So this is actually the way to do it in our mind versus spending $30 billion to do another line that more or less this will get most of the benefits without spending that. So I just want to highlight those things, which is if we really care about safety and we really want to actually talk about cost efficiency, we got to get into some level of automation for our region.
And so I just want to make sure everyone in this room has heard you two gentlemen correctly. This goes towards addressing some of the key core capacity issues along with bus priority here, and will allow us to move more trains through the system than we could, and more people than we can do today. And so this is enhancing and expanding and giving us new things in the Metro Rail system.
Yes, I think this is very responsive to both what we've heard from Senator Serval, but also Delegate Sickles at the last meeting, right? I actually think this is that triangulation, which is we need to enhance our service and capacity, but we also got to be pragmatic about how we are funding and delivering the assets we have. And so for us, we don't want to run a concept of operations from 1980. We want to run a concept of operations in 2025, go forward. So we believe we're not only going to get a lot more capacity, the use of those trains. So a brand new rail car, if we were buying a new rail car today, like the 8000, but we purchased it today, it'd probably be about $3 million. So if you have an 8-car rail set, that's $24 million. It's a fixed cost generally, right? So for every trip that we can run, it costs very little. The idea is to take this $100 billion asset we have and get way more productivity out of it. So as Tom mentioned on the red line, we went back to ATO. We're now running the red line, same frequency for 2 less train sets in June. Think of what that does for the trains on capital, yards, facility maintenance, all of that stuff. And this allows us to even, we believe I think it's 5 train sets less to run the same frequency. So it changes the entire capital program forever and the operating curve forever, which then will create more opportunity for investments and even more transportation for the region.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. And again, that last point is a theme you're going to hear as we move to the next topic, which is you can run higher levels of service with the same resources because the per unit operating cost is going down here. And so we're making capital investments that lower the operating cost of the system so that we can run more service for the same amount of operating expense. So it's kind of, that beneficial cycle, if you will, of getting the benefits of the capital from the liability standpoint, but then also really improving the operations as Mr. Clark got to, so we can run more service at a lower cost. So the next concept that we were bringing back to you all, and then we're getting ready to open up here for discussion, and I suspect there may be some comments, is bus priority. And so when we met in December, we talked a lot about using existing assets and to maximize the existing system. And what we were talking about then was really just running more frequency. And we kind of generically heard positive feedback that yes, if we have assets that aren't being used today, we should be running them more frequently and not just having them kind of parked. We're bringing back to you today a slightly different concept that we think will advance that goal, but just like rail automation does more than that. And so instead of the idea of just spending money to increase frequency and just to pay operating costs, we think there's a real benefits from creating a capital regional bus priority program. And what this will do is look at existing high frequency routes, make investments, which will be tailored to the given corridor, in those to put in bus only lanes, signal priority, queue jump, level boarding, and a whole host of different types of treatments in our streets that will then make these routes run faster. So again, if we just ran more service, we're doing nothing to reduce travel times or improve reliability. What bus priority will do is make these trips faster for the riders, importantly, make them more reliable. As we know, buses can get stuck in traffic jams just like cars can, particularly on the unexpected ones. And then what those two things do, just like it does on the rail side, is it allows you to run the same service with less buses, or said in a different way, increase frequency without increasing your operating costs. And so WMATA has looked at this on like the W4 route in Eastern DC. And today it takes 20 buses to run that service. If we spent capital dollars to implement bus priority along that route, you could increase the frequency that is there today by 15% without increasing operating costs. And so if you think about what that then means for the customer, if you ride the W4, is your trip is now faster, your trip is now more reliable, and you have less wait time between buses because there are more buses. And if you're the person paying that bill, the operating cost for that bill has not gone up. And so we've implemented this in a few places, and a lot of places, though, we haven't done the whole corridor. We've done bits and pieces of the corridor here. And you can see some real world kind of examples on the slide. So in 16th Street, crashes went down almost 30%. Travel speeds and times for the buses went up 15%. And importantly, it didn't really change vehicle travel times along that corridor. So there's, some variation. Some days a little faster, some days a little slower. On H Street in downtown DC, travel speeds of the buses on the H&I up more than 60% when you put in those bus priority treatments. And so this is something that we're seeing has real benefits where it has been used, but we have only used it on a few corridors in this region. And so as we talk about where population is growing in this region in the future and how do we find ways to serve that and to also improve these existing high frequency routes, we think a regional bus priority program could help deliver benefits across the board in the region. Mr. Donahue?
Thank you. These were really incredible statistics. When we look at, and our director of transportation is here today, when we look at all the bus priority lanes that we put in place, these are not outliers. Consistently, they all do the same things. They improve travel time. You don't have this here. They improve reliability significantly. In other words, the buses come when they're supposed to come. People aren't left waiting. Crashes decrease in almost every case by double-digit percentages. And the part that people often take double takes on is the last one, which is vehicle travel times. We study regular vehicles not using the bus lanes. Does it make it life worse for them? Was honestly even my assumption going in. These are policy trade-offs we're making. When we looked at the data around vehicle travel time, it really was unchanged. And not just at 16th Street, when we looked at it across the multiple instances where we put in bus priority lanes, the folks driving vehicles didn't really experience a change. They may not perceive that because they're still in traffic before and after, but when we really study the experience, it doesn't change at all, which to me helps really shape the discussion about not talking to the types of trade-offs that I thought we were going to have to talk about. So the 16th Street's the longest one, but we've made that consistently. We've experienced that consistently throughout the system. We will continue to expand our bus priority lanes. Even with difficult economic times, we will still be expanding it. We just modulate up and down the pace of it. Our limit, though, is that our borders, we develop to where our borders stop. And we know on Georgia Avenue, a lot of those buses start in Silver Spring. We have buses that come in from Virginia, where people do pay those premiums to take the bus service. So where I think we really can go to the next level is understanding where our respective investments we may make as individual jurisdictions can be coordinated in a way that really changes the whole experience of the route, no matter what jurisdiction it starts or stops in.
Nick, I think you said one more slide and then kind of that jumps into the larger discussion. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you, Cheryl. And one other comment I wanted to make on this, because it was something that really caught me off guard in one of our, or not, surprised me in our advisory group's discussions, is OmniRide, which operates mostly the commuter bus service from Prince William County. The Bob Schneider, who runs that service, says for the buses that go from Haymarket to the State Department, if you're looking at like the midpoint in that trip in terms of time, and again, we're talking here, I don't know, about 25 miles in total, it takes them as long to get from Haymarket to the Potomac as it does to get from the Potomac to the State Department. And so again, just to put that in perspective, Haymarket is where the I-66 express lanes end near the Fauquier border in Prince William. To get to the Potomac, you have to travel 32 miles from that park and ride lot. To get from the Potomac to the State Department, I'm going to get it wrong, but it's like 2 miles. And just, if you just want to pause and like note that you have a lot of folks who use those types of services here, and where they're running into a lot of the friction. And to Mr. Donahue's point, it's not in the jurisdictions actually running the service. It's when they hit kind of the Potomac River here. And so we're talking a lot about, or I talked a lot about kind of the fixed route service, but this can benefit all of the bus service. in the region if we work together on where and how it's deployed. So again, just think about that. I'm assuming they're not speeding, so I'm assuming it takes about 30 minutes to get from Haymarket to the Potomac, and then takes them another 30 minutes to make those last 2 miles from the Potomac to the State Department. So again, just real world examples from folks out there about how this can benefit, but also the impact of not having these types of treatments in place. And so then our question to the group is, you gave us direction in December. In some places, there was a lot of consensus. In other places, we heard kind of multiple things. We're bringing these concepts back to you to say, are we moving in the right direction? Do you have questions about these concepts that we presented? Are there things that you don't like in the concepts that we've presented? Is there something missing from the concepts that we presented? And with that, I'm going to step back.
Thanks, Nick. And again, appreciate that. And I feel like we've had a little bit of conversation along the way, which is totally fine, but encourage people to jump in at this point as well, because I think that they've tried to be responsive from our last meeting, both to really kick the tires on, and this is again the hard work of the work groups to really kick the tires on how to drill down and manage the costs that people are coming back with, but also have things of import and ideas of consequence that are put back for us to continue to work on. So I appreciate that. But let me turn to some more questions. I think I saw Director Kirschbaum and then Mr. Ehrlich after that. Sorry, Ms. Randall, I see your card up too. Okay. All right.
Great.
And then DeFernetti. All right.
Thanks, Councilmember. And just for those of us who aren't fully familiar with the lay of the land across the region, where are we in terms of bus priority implementation? I'm very familiar with the district. We have 13 miles of priority bus lanes we put in the past few years, and I see them elsewhere. Is this something that, I guess I'm not even clear on what the proposal is for? Is this a centralized effort that would happen? Or is this just something that we would have coordinated centrally, but that ultimately would get done by the respective regions?
That's a great question. So if we receive positive feedback today, we're going to work on a lot of those questions. This is a scalable effort that could take different forms. I think at a minimum, we want to see coordination across the different jurisdictions, particularly as we have service that crosses those jurisdictional lines. There's also an opportunity where it could be more centralized, and then it would obviously, work with a DDOT, work with a VDOT, work with a ride-on and other folks in the region there. And so there's a variety of ways that can be shaped. And I think what the advisory groups are waiting to hear from the task force is whether or not the task force thinks this is something they want them to do more due diligence on. It's the proposal we're bringing back from the advisory groups kind of to the task force. And then on your first question, I would say it is being implemented in different places. Some places are doing it more aggressively than others, but we also think there's a lot of opportunity that can be missed if this keeps happening on an ad hoc basis without that coordination, again, because the services cross jurisdictional boundaries.
Mr. Eldridge.
We got to do that experiment on Georgia Avenue, and I was pretty happy with the results, but I think we way underperformed the potential. That route, for example, goes through lots of areas with apartments. They not having a normal option other than getting in a bus that goes as slow as a car during normal rush hours. People didn't think, well, maybe I can take this bus now. And I think that, some really aggressive advertising to say this is actually a new and better service might have raised that 900, which I don't think is even the number of people who were denied, wouldn't have gotten rides at the Wheaton Metro. I think you only captured some of that was potential. The other thing is signal priority. We didn't have signal priority. I think if you're going to do this and make somebody want to get out of their car, signal priority is key. And the other thing I'd say, I think we've got to have some flexibility for perceptions. At rush hour, if we can keep buses coming in a 5 to 7 minute time frame or less on a good day, I think you can justify taking the lane. But when we got to the afternoon and people were waiting 10 or 15 minutes to see a bus go by, drivers go out of their minds to see that lane not being used and then never see a bus. So I'd be happy to do this, particularly focused on rush hours and the shoulder. And the other things, I want to do it on Wisconsin because we have no way to the west side of DC from Montgomery County that's fast. The Metro doesn't go there. This would help us get there. And I wanted to do it on Connecticut, and I'd be interested in doing on Georgia and 16th. So we should talk with the district, I've raised this before with your offices. I think that, this would be something we could cooperate on, and it could be a game changer.
Thanks, Nick, and then I'll turn to Ms. Randall right after that.
Well, and Mr. Archer, I think you bring up a really good point on the perception issue here. One, in terms of like the marketing to help people understand the benefits, but then I think secondarily that the education and discussion about for everyone else what's happening in that lane. And so, in Virginia, there's a large network of express lanes, and the common refrain is, I'm sitting in traffic and there's nobody in the express lane. And that is a true, just 100% perception issue. Because you're not moving, you see the same like 10 cars surrounded next to you. And then in the express lane, you just kind of see this like a car go by every second. And we went and looked up the statistics, and you can find similar statistics for bus lanes, but on I-95 northbound in the morning rush hour, the express lanes move twice as many people per lane as the general purpose lanes. Again, because of the bus riders, because of the carpoolers and the van pullers. And it's the same story kind of on those bus lanes. So I think you raised a really good point there about helping people kind of understand what's happening, because even if you see a bus every minute, one bus every minute, and again, it may not be that frequent, that's a lot more people than the cars sitting there in traffic.
Thank you, Ms. Randall.
Mr. Donahue, I cannot believe you just did the sound effect of the cars going by you. Only men do that kind of stuff. Women don't ever do that kind of stuff. It's hilarious. And Mr. Webster, when you put the data centers up, we don't want those in Loudoun County. We're good with data centers in Loudoun County. A couple things. So much of what has been said today has been very encouraging, and I do want to compliment the administrative working groups for all the work you've done, because clearly you've done some deep diving and have done a marvelous job. I love the idea of how to get buses to move more effectively and decrease travel time and increase ridership. And I will associate myself with my colleague and friend, Mr. McKay, when we talk about money, funds and where they come from. I have been saying this since I've been on COG. We cannot continue to not be willing to push the federal government very, very hard to provide more than just a free of money. It's going to almost expire with inflation, and the fact that our system moves to federal government workforce is absolutely every reason we should have more federal money in. But I'm also going to associate myself with Senator Servel's remarks, not quite in the way he said them perhaps, but Senator Servel's remarks overall, in that, Mr. Clark, I thought that we had given different direction. I thought actually we were going to talk about consolidating the bus systems. And I did hear your answer, Mr. Donahue, but I also heard Mr. Clark's answer, in that we really didn't, I'm sorry, Mr. Mercer, and that we really didn't have that discussion. And so that those instructions weren't given. And if we're going to do that, that task will now outlive this task force. And so that's all wonderful and kind of new information for me. So I do think that probably it might be helpful for us to have a discussion before the discussion of whether or not consolidating a bus system works, what that looks like, how that works. I know that it has been said, but something being said and then given direction are two different things. And so I think it was discussed, but then we missed the part of going any further than discussing it. And so I don't know if the discussion disappeared because there was never instruction to have you have that discussion. But I do think it's one that going forward we should figure out how to do that, even if that discussion, if this task force outlives that discussion. So I appreciate that. But really, thank you, Mr. Donahue, and thank you for everyone for all the amazing work that's been done so far.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Mr. Clark or Mr. Webster, could you talk a little bit about what coordination actually is? I think when it was first discussed, it was more about implementing over the period of time in stages. This wasn't, I think some people had the impression this is something that WMATA could just come in and do like with the snap of a finger, and that's not, and that, okay. And it's, okay. I just want to make sure that's not the case.
Yes, good question. I think, one, there could be perspectives, and then there's the reality. So I feel like there's the work groups are working, but I think, listen, the way we said at Metro is, listen, we want to partner with anyone. We're the big elephant in the room. There's no getting around that when it comes to the transit side. So if someone wants us to help them and think through partial, full consolidation or whatnot, we're happy to have that conversation and kind of benefit cost analysis. The district clearly decided that was the right thing for them. And now there is no DC circulator, and we've decided to do different things in DC to help with those customers. And there's clearly financial and other aspects of that. If people want that to do that, we're more than willing to partner. Now, if there's a history where Metro didn't want to do that in the past, I can't speak to that. I know there's a lot of, sometimes there's emotion around this topic. I look at it like, listen, your county or city administrator said at the, Tim Henstreet said it the best. He said, I think if we started today, we wouldn't start out with 10 operators today. Like, you wouldn't purposely design your system that way. So we are at the table if people want to work on that. I will say the more people that are in, that thing gets much better. And so if one agency says, hey, Metro, we want to work with you, that the relative gain could be almost zero to marginal. But if we did certain things together as a region, there could be significant value. And like procurement is a good example. We buy, I don't know, like 100+ buses a year, and some of the agencies of the region might buy 5. So clear, and we already have a vehicle engineering department that is funded by everyone here. So we might as well get the most out of the vehicle engineering department. That's the way we were kind of looking at it. But we also have lots of fish to fry every day. So we're not dying to solve everyone's challenges, but we're more than willing to be a partner if the group wants us to.
That was very helpful. Thanks so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thanks. All right, I've got a bit of a lineup here. I'm going to go ahead and let me just read out everybody's name that I've got in the lineup, just so folks know where they are. I've got Mr. DeFerranti, Ms. Jackson, Mr. Donahue, Mr. McAndrew, Mr. Survival, then Mr. Lusk. That's my order.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, on the two components here, just I think we've thanked the working groups. I don't know if we've quite, Mr. Clark, there also seemed to be some partnership and thinking between the last meeting and this one with respect to this ask. And so I just want to add my thanks to that component of it. I think this is, I think there's a strategy in federal lobbying that is ask for the moon, and then, you'll come down. And I've never subscribed to that. Ask real. And I think we will make more progress. So full support for the first part of it. We've started to have a conversation about, I know there's another slide on local transit needs. To Mr. Mercer, to your points, I do think that there are fair questions on consolidation. Mr. Ehrlich mentioned some of them. But I also think there's a lot of expertise that's needed. There's a benefit to systems where Arlington puts skin in the game for its own service, and that could lead to slightly different types of consolidation than the benefits that Mr. Clark is mentioning. And so I guess what I'd throw out there as an idea for thinking about it, because I want to be efficient when I'm asking for the mic, is that when some of the questions of the big systematic consolidation, I feel like those questions might be best served when we had a little more data and information about what consolidation means, as opposed to me just ideologically saying I'm one way or the other on that. And so that's why I would hold for that, because I do think if we think of the systems of funding, there's a benefit. The federal skin should be in the game. That's outside our control. The state and the localities, at least from a Virginia perspective, I see benefit for both of them to having a little bit of skin in the game and thus impact on service.
All right, thank you. Ms. Jackson.
Thank you. I do want to say that I really appreciate the work, this presentation and the work of the group. Coming from Prince George's and having just submitted our budget, I understand the fiscal realities that we are facing, and certainly Maryland as a state. And so while I like shiny new things as well, I just think the reality is that we can't always afford them. And that's just where we are. In terms of automation, I do see that as something new that can be, that we can take on and would impress, I think, can impress the rider, the customer. And so if done correctly, I think that the whole experience will be more the customer will enjoy the entire experience more so than before. I did have a couple of questions, or one question specifically as it relates to bus priority. I do appreciate the statistics we got from the district as it relates to vehicle travel time, but I'm just curious as to whether Metro or perhaps Mr. Elridge has any statistics around vehicle travel time in jurisdictions that look different from the district, perhaps that look more like Prince George's. Any information you have there as to how
I got the sense,
priority lanes?
I got the sense the cars were a little slower, but that was to kind of be expected if there's no priority and some other things that I think would have helped with that. Also, I just think the lack of advertising didn't get as many people in as they could have gotten in. It's not, you can't just turn this on and off, particularly when people know when it's going off again.
I think we could also supplement this with looking at other cities and regions that have done larger scale BRT and bus priority and do a little bit of benchmarking and share some of that data. I think you're right, different parts of the region with different densities and different road conditions and things like that. Well, the costs and the benefits are different, and that's part of what the working group on bus priority is wrestling with right now. And as Nick said, coming back in May with a little bit more there. But I think there are certainly opportunities in our outside of the district in our region where there would be substantial benefits where there aren't projects in motion yet.
Yeah, I thank you for that. And I do think there is promise to priority lanes even in Prince George's County, and would love to continue to explore that idea. We have significant transit gaps in the county, and I think that exploring priority lanes would assist us, as well as efficiencies with our bus system. I'm not sure about consolidation. I think that's a heavy lift for jurisdictions, but certainly efficiencies, like you gave the example of procurement. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ms. Jackson. I want to note the time, we're about 15 minutes out from the scheduled end of our meeting. So let me turn to Kevin Donahue.
I'll be very brief. Quick comment on both sides of the slide. The left-hand side, I do want to speak out in support of the proposal here for the additional $450 million. When we started the process of looking at the capital cliff, it wasn't unclear what year it was going to start, how much it was going to be, and what constituted the cliff. And a lot of work went into defining what years we really have to invest more. There was a push and pull between state of good repair and doing something new. And the automation was one of the proposals that really struck it, both improving the core system and also having a new, better customer experience. And was at a number that when we looked at it collectively, we thought we might be able to absorb it or make adjustments to our own revenues to be able to account for it. DC has in place starting in 27 or 28 an increase in our sales taxes. It'll be designed to be able to assist with Metro. Our intention is to have it designed to coincide with some of the capital cliffs. So something I really support and want to thank the folks in the working groups that help clarify those critical questions. Just quickly on the right-hand side, DC has in its budget to expand priority bus lanes. So when I look at this, I really think, or do we do it separately or do we do it together? So we will still have money in our capital budget for bus lanes, whether we work with the region or we don't. It'll just be much, much more effective if we are working with our regional partners that are have a board as adjacent to us in designing where they go and where they go, what they look like, and what timing and what years you put them in. So to me, I look at that as how to coordinate something that we are all probably going to be working on our own otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Donahue. Mr. McAndrew.
Thanks. I'll be quick. So on the bus front, it makes sense that we're talking about this. I think this is a huge opportunity. One, I think I'll just raise it for everybody in the room. Fare evasion is a real issue on the bus side. We've got fare evasion exceeding 75%, right?
Certainly depending on where, yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, cost savings and ability to reinvest in the system there, if we can go back to pre-COVID days, I don't know if we can get back to that point, but it's a huge opportunity to continue to expand service. But I think in terms of, before we come back next time, it'd be good to get a sense of incentives on the bus side, because right now there's little to no incentives baked into the strategy that I can understand from an investor, both to WMATA or to the roadway network. So we'd put up additional money to WMATA for additional service that gets reinvested in WMATA, but we're expected to do the capital outlay and the continued maintenance of the facility. So I just think, thinking through that strategy would be good.
I just want to make one comment as we move forward, if I can, on the fare stuff specifically. When we started off this task force, there was one conversation too about regional fare policy. And I still think that's something we really have to come to grips with, because I do hear that comment a lot about what is Metro doing on enforcing fares, because we're losing significant amount of revenue, especially on the bus side. We've done a really good job on the rail side, and we're trying hard on the bus side. But at the same time we're doing that, more of our regional partners are going to fare free. And it's very hard to have a consistent message with someone on the same street that our bus you have to pay, and I'm going to have a cop there to ticket you. And the next bus is you're supposed to get on free, and elected officials or others are cheering that on, saying fare free. So I think we just have to have an honest conversation about fare policy, and then hold everyone to some level of accountability under that policy. And I think there's just a fairness related to how we enforce or what we decide to do related to that.
Thank you, Senator Surville.
Thanks. And sorry if I'm a little impatient. I just got a call that 6 of my bills got vetoed today. So today is veto day and amendment day in Virginia. So in any event, I want to make clear that in terms of my prior comments, I don't think we should be putting Metro Rail all over the place. That to me is completely unrealistic. I totally get that. But I think the kind of Metro Rail expansion, like was talked about with the bloop, or whatever we want to call it, the Blue Line Loop thing, to deal with the core capacity at Georgetown, and to deal with more transit access across the southern part of the Potomac between PG and southern Fairfax County, and to a lesser extent Prince William, is something where there's going to be a lot of future need and demand. But what's been presented today, I think is helpful, and I appreciate the work that's been done and the fact that numbers have come down. I'm hopeful that the current administration doesn't move half the federal workers out to other states, and we still have people actually using the system sometime over the next 2 decades. And then whatever happens in the next 3 years is not permanently destructive of our economy around here, which I think is a sort of a looming question about what we're talking about right now. But the efficiency stuff, I'm sure, will also make our current governor happy in his last 8 months of his term. We're going to have somebody new to deal with after that. And I think our new governor in Virginia at least will have a very different perspective about what we've been talking about here for the last year and going forward. But I'm also not convinced that BRT is the perfect solution everybody thinks it is. One of the reasons that road expansions have found disfavor in Northern Virginia is the cost of land has become so extraordinary. Cost to construct anything is making it cost prohibitive to widen things. And so if you're going to do BRT by taking away vehicle traffic, have fun with your reelection by taking away travel lanes, right? I mean, there's a lot of really bad choices here in terms of trying to solve our hopefully what will be our growing population, assuming again the administration doesn't ruin our economy. But and maybe I'll get a call from the FBI for being disloyal on the way home. I don't know, but in any event, but it just strikes me that politically, the way you sell these things, I mean, we're always telling the public that the government is going to make things more efficient. It's always going to be better. Your last whatever many decades of experience is not going to be the future. And the studies all say that humans love to talk about new shiny things. They don't like to talk about maintenance. Maintenance is a very unattractive thing. There was a whole Freakonomics episode about 6 months ago about this, and about how everybody wants to expand. Nobody wants to maintain. The way you sell maintenance and the way you sell this stuff, the way you sell spending another $600 million a year on maintaining the system is to also talk about it being a bridge to the future and a bridge to expansion. And so that's why I don't think we can lose sight of the fact that we need to be talking about how we're going to grow the rail system, not put it everywhere, but just that that as we throw more people at this system, it's going to get clogged, and we have to have ways to unclog it. And the bloop is the one I like, but we clearly need another tunnel under where the silver and the orange and the blue are going through. Personally, I think we need to have one over the Wilson Bridge. We're currently having that fight with Maryland right now about what to do with the extra capacity on the bridge. And if we don't lay down some markers on that, soon, it's going to turn into a car lane, and we're never going to have transit there. So, I mean, I think this conversation also has to be about expansion as the ultimate goal of doing all this and making all these big investments. And that's how you build public support for spending more money on the system. That's my perspective about the political way to get from where we are to home plate. And this to me is just is a bridge to the future. That's how I think we ought to be framing this and selling it. And I also think the consolidation thing is an easy thing for the public to understand and makes perfect sense and needs to be part of the dialogue going forward. Just doesn't make sense to anybody that you have whatever it is, 20 different bus systems operating all in the same metro area. It makes no sense to anybody. So, and I'm gonna have to leave and go deal with my vetoes.
Well, we wish you the best of luck.
Thanks.
All right, thank you. I'm going to go Mr. Lusk, Ms. Kirschbaum, then Mr. Hill.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'll go very quickly. I think I'm the newest member here, so I'll say I very much appreciate the fiduciary responsibility that's been exercised towards the taxpayers as it relates to the modernization of the existing system. I think this is the right approach, and certainly improving it, making it safer and more reliable is going to be great for those who are using the system. On the second side of the chart, I'm very excited about the bus optimization and the priority that we're talking about doing there, because I think about in my own district where we have so many residents who are in some parts of the district in lower income areas. They are trying to get to employment centers, and I see the point here, make connections to economic opportunity. And I think that is so important, giving them that opportunity and having better bus service to enable that is going to be a positive thing. And I'd also make the point that, being able to consolidate the bus service, to look at ways to make it more efficient and to have better connectivity between those systems, I think is also going to be a very important thing. So I look forward to seeing how this progresses, and again, just appreciate the alternative as it's here, and I'm supportive of it as well. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lusk. Ms. Kirschbaum?
Just wanted to give some personal testimony on the consolidation effort for people to keep in mind. We spend about $20 million a year operating the circulator, and we're facing $200 million in capital costs to electrify the fleet, build out a garage and electrify that. We are spending about $10 million a year for WMATA to take that on. And it's a standalone agreement. So we had some levers in terms of frequency and exactly how we wanted the route to work. So it's been a significant amount of savings for us. So please keep that in mind, because those are real dollars. And then, vis-a-vis bus priority, it's just feels like it's low hanging fruit. It's inexpensive. You can do these things iteratively. We're actually going back on the H&I routes because those routes have some, we've gotten complaints, and it's easy to continue to tweak. I actually don't think that the coordination is that complicated. We've got some clear thresholds of when this makes sense in terms of frequency of service, level of service, ridership percentage. So identifying the maps of where they should be. I mean, we work hand in glove with WMATA on them already. So this just feels like an easy thing to move on.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hill?
Well, thank you, Chair Allen. The conversation has been absolutely fantastic today, but I just want to make sure everybody understands what myself and Mr. McDougall have been tasked to do. State of good repair, automation, and bus priority. If we want to go to consolidation, I would appreciate if we could wait until we get the other three things done and then move forward, because the one thing as the county executive in Fairfax County, I'm thinking about the numbers, and the numbers were very important to me to get us to where we are today. I think we're about 2/3 of the way there. Mr. McDougall and I are going to huddle after this meeting and continuously huddle to talk about the bus side even further. But consolidation, I'm sorry, was not a part of our thought process. So if it has to change, we need to get some clarity on to make that change. And I'm really brief and really quick.
Right. I appreciate it. All right, Mr. McKay, but I'm going to ask relatively brief because
I'll be
we've got a
very
couple quick
brief.
slides ahead.
Just on the bus consolidation piece, I think there's a big difference between efficiencies and consolidations and takeovers. And every jurisdiction has a very different size bus operation. So I appreciate our representatives from district talking about the circulator. If I was in the district, that would be an easy decision for me to make because most of my bus ridership is already using Metro Bus or the Metro Rail. And so my partnership with Metro is a little bit different. We have a very strong partnership with Metro in Fairfax County, but I have a massive transit operation that almost every one of our board meetings has an action item on it dealing with a change to a connector route or some other thing. And so the bureaucracy piece that gets added to going to a regional board to be able to do that gets very complicated for a transit system the size that I operate. That does not mean we can't be looking at efficiencies that don't equal takeover. Can we do things with maintenance? Can we do things with procurement? Those things I think we're wide open to, but when you have to frequently change routes to accommodate population trends, what's happening with your own budget, what's happening with ridership, quickly and efficiently, people who run big bus systems need the autonomy to be able to do that quickly. And I think that's one of the challenges I just want to make sure is on the table as a part of the discussion.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Let me turn to Clark Mercer here. After that, I'm going to turn to Nick to take us to the wrap-up slides.
Just real quickly, when we partnered with WMATA for DMV Moves, I will tell you there was concern on the behalf of localities and operators that this was a play to consolidate them and for Metro to take them over. And I said, if COG's going to put its name next to this and partner, that is not a goal from the outset. That being said, again, if we finish our charge and this group takes a vote and wants us to look at that, we want to be transparent about that. But for all the operators, and they're either sitting in the audience or listening online, in good faith, we have partnered through these 6 work groups to see where we can drive better efficiencies and coordination. And I know I'm beating this, but when you go back and talk to your operators, it's having a conversation with them. Are you doing everything you can so that we get a fare policy across this region that makes sense? That we can use one app to pay for buses across this region, that students are treated the same across this region, that we're really looking at procurement. We procure at COG bottled water, diesel gas, road salt for all of your localities if they participate with us. But once we get into procurement shops, I will tell you there's turf battles and folks don't want to do joint procurements. Going to your procurement teams and saying, are you really leaning in with this effort and seeing what rocks we can turn over, what efficiencies we can drive would be appreciated. But I agree with Mr. Hill. Let's get through the charge that we've been given, but this has not been an end around to consolidate. It's been a very transparent effort to see if we can get better efficiencies and drive costs down.
Thank you, Mr. Mercer. All right, Nick.
All right, at lightning speed and just in looking at the time that we have here, just want to give this the task force a quick update on local transit needs. We did present some information to you all last fall on that. As we have dived deeper into those numbers, we're seeing just some inconsistencies in some of the information that we received from the operators. And so we are actually now proposing to pivot and how we'll quantify and identify some of these local transit needs. The great news is we're going to use work product that's coming out of one of those work groups. And so of the 6 work groups, one of those is the various operators and WMATA creating regional service design guidelines that identifies kind of optimal levels of bus service based on characteristics like density, population, employment, and demographics of an area. And so we are going to use those guidelines and evaluate existing service for the other operators to identify potential gaps. In some areas, those gaps may be small, in some areas they may be larger. None of that is to say that those are things that have to be done or shouldn't be done. It's just to say, based on the expertise of the transit operators in this area, using the service design guidelines, here's where there's gaps in service and there may be cost beneficial and optimal service that could be added that would, have high levels of ridership and be beneficial. And then on the commuter rail side, the world has really shifted a fair amount since we came up with some of those numbers, and that deals with the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority purchasing the Manassas line. What's really, really important about that is there's a rail yard in Alexandria there, which kind of changes a lot about what's possible in terms of commuter rail service and potentially run-through service in this region. When we put together these numbers last summer, that was not announced, and that was not factored into what we've done here. And so we have to sit down with Veery and Mark and essentially, in light of this change and that acquisition that they made, redo the numbers. That's actually a good thing, right? Because there's a whole host of challenges that we were thinking about with regard to how could run through service happen, or what are the things that are necessary to do it. And now a lot of those steps have actually been taken by the Passenger Rail Authority in Virginia. And again, we just simply did not know that and couldn't have predicted that last summer because they were in confidential negotiations with Norfolk Southern and we didn't know. So we will be updating those and we'll be bringing that back. I just wanted to let you know we're doing that. So you'll probably hear from some of your operators, those of you who have who represent some of those folks. This is what they're talking about if you hear them say, I'm getting a lot of questions about DMV moves. So then the last thing is we are going to follow up. We're not having a discussion now. That is, we're not staying here for another 30 minutes. What I want to let you know is we will be following up with each of you in the interim between now and the next meeting to talk about funding and to get some of your feedback so that when we start to have those discussions in the future, we can benefit from kind of your latest thinking and we can take that into account before we get into the room and hopefully really have a good structured conversation about the funding side as we start to move closer towards a potential number and need that the region is looking at. And with that, I'll turn it over to Chair Smedberg.
Thank you. On behalf of Mr. Allen and myself, we want to thank Mr. Clark, or Mr. Mercer and Mr. Clark on their teams for all the work that they've done to get us to this point. The two co-chairs, Mr. McDougall and Mr. Hill, thank you for all the work you've done in this interim time since our last meeting. The sort of a draft for our next meeting, which is going to be Friday, May 16th. So please mark that in your calendars now. We'll report out from the work groups. We'll have some further discussion about bus priorities and then the funding issue, which Mr. Donahue just outlined. So thank you all very much. Again, Friday, May 16th is our next meeting. Thank you.